A marked shift in way of being, I notice, is the divesting. The divesting of burdens, the divesting of preoccupation with notness, with that which we do not prefer. It's releasing that and letting go of that. And paradoxically or ironically, in letting go of that, we actually allow it to, you can say, resolve itself. We allow it to find its own resolution. It's kind of like letting go of the seed and allowing it to fall to the ground. In so releasing, letting go, divesting ourselves of from holding the burden of taking on the seed and then releasing it to the ground, the seed can finally find its home, right? Its resolution, its growth, its fruition into fullness, into yesness, the yesness of the plant, right? As long as we keep holding on to the seed, then the more it's retained in notness, not a plant, not a plant nest, because we're holding on to it. We're keeping it in notness and not allowing it to, to find its way to the ground and grow into its wholeness and fullness. Or let's say for those who have children, the more you hold on to your child, the more you infantilize them, the more you take on their autonomy, their sense of self, and do everything for them, the more they don't grow up, right? The more they don't come into full bloom, the more they keep being infantilized and compressed and limited, the more you stunt their growth and capacity and hinder them from becoming an adult, right? They grow up to be dysfunctional, dependent, entitled toddlers or controlling petty tyrants. And so that's the mechanics here. It's very counterintuitive for the ego mind, right? Because for the ego mind, everything is opposite. It thinks that if it holds on to something, that's how it gets resolved. The more that it holds on, the more it preoccupies itself. It thinks that if I'm the one, I preoccupy myself with this, I'm the one that holds this, take this burden upon myself and be the one to do it, then that's the only way it can be resolved. That's the only way it comes into fruition. That's the only way it gets finished or it gets completed, right? And so we are locked in the gear of doership, of labor, you can say, of the manual ego doership, full of effort, full of strife, full of stress and sense of burden, because it's me, I'm the one. And the thing with that is actually we're keeping it in notness, right? So we're keeping it in notness. So therefore, I have to go do it. I have to chase it. I have to seek it. I have to be the one to make great effort. We're in entertaining the notness, right? And so the experience that we get is notness. Let me give an example. I think many also have a similar experience. So I was looking for an orthodontist. I'm thinking of finally getting my teeth fixed. It has severe misalignment. And so I'm seeking a dentist, right? A good dentist that can handle my case because it's on the severe side. So I started consulting different dentists, but it doesn't feel settled. I don't feel confident or settled to undergo treatment with any of them. And I was about to sleep, but I kind of couldn't because I'm quote unquote problemizing this issue. I am, in preoccupation with this quote unquote problem, with this issue. and I seem to cannot find the solution for it. And I'm wasting time and money, consulting different dentists, and I couldn't find someone that feels right. Hence, I'm in that busy, problemizing mode. I'm in this static, busyness. And so I realized this is inefficient. If it's up to me and I'm consulting different dentists one after another, again, it's a waste of time and money. It's inefficient. It's a very ineffective way of going about it. And so what I did was I released this burden, from holding it, right? From taking it upon myself to resolve. I'm the one who seek, I'm the one who search, to releasing that, you can say, thought form, desire, or seeking, and let it resolve itself. You be the one. You be the one to seek the right dentist for me. You be the one to find your own resolution. I give you autonomy. You be the one to find your way and find, your partner, let's say. It's like a plug and socket. So the desire is, let's say, the plug, and it's the desire for the right dentist. And so I'm setting it free, giving it autonomy. You be the one to look for your partner, for your socket. And so I divested myself of that burden and gave it the freedom. It's like when you're holding a bird in your hand, and then you release your hand and you set it free, let it fly to wherever it needs to go. So that's what I did. And after 2 days, I get a message from this particular dental clinic, and they're asking me if I want to schedule an appointment. And this dental clinic was recommended by someone in a forum. I have contacted them before, but I didn't get a response. And so I thought it was a lost cause and it's no longer an option. But they finally messaged back, and it's just now that I received the response. So I was able to make an appointment with them. And in my opinion, upon doing the consultation, this dentist seems to be sincere, trustworthy, and capable. It's also interesting that when I came back for the 3D scanning, she mentioned how the recent seminar she attended presented a case that's similar to mine, and that the patient is also similar to me in a sense that she's also not amenable to other invasive procedures. So the dentist mentioned that the case and the patient actually reminded her of me, and she thought that God was showing her how to handle the case. So, there's a kind of synchronicity happening there. Anyway, that was the experience. And again, you can say it's a coincidence. What if that dental clinic will really contact you regardless whether or not you did the releasing releasing thing, or gave the quote unquote the thought form autonomy? Maybe it's just a coincidence, right? But that's the experience. And I'm sure that a lot of people also have a similar kind of experience, wherein the moment they release the burden, the preoccupation, the issue, quote unquote, that they're, problemizing about day and night, the moment they release it, surrender that, then somehow it resolves itself. It finds its way. And this reminds me again of what I mentioned in my previous video, the scene in Fantasia where Mickey Mouse granted autonomy to the broom, and the broom came alive, right? Mickey Mouse has granted it life and aliveness so the broom can do its thing autonomously, automatically. So Mickey Mouse, from being the doer, he released that. He granted autonomy to the broom. Now, basically, what's happened is that you let go of the notness. Like in the example that I gave, the notness of finding a dentist, right? So once that is let go of or released, it resolved itself. Notness resolved itself into yesness. It's ceasing entertaining the notness, and letting it handle itself instead of, hoarding it or taking it upon yourself. It's giving it autonomy, giving it the blessing to self-resolve itself, to handle itself, you know, to find its own way because it knows itself better. It's more intelligent, you could say. Again, it's kind of like a child, right? The more you infantilize, the more you hold on to them, the more you keep them from their full growth, right? The more you keep them immature and infantilized, and the more that you dictate on them and impose on them, the more it backfires. It's actually counterproductive. The adult child is an autonomous being who knows itself better, right? Because it's itself. You are yourself, but the child is a separate person. It knows itself better. So the more impose on them, dictate on them, the more it just doesn't work, right? And so in the same way with this notness ideas, it's like a recognition, it's like a releasing, a creating this quote unquote conducive environment for growth. So instead of, oppressing, controlling, colonizing, you allow them to grow and find their own way, find their own thing, you could say. Another example, I used to draw a lot, especially when I was young. It's my main ego identity. It's my main sense of self. After the initial awakening, I lost interest in it, because it's not anymore an identity. It's not anymore an ego identity. I lost interest, basically. It's like a shedding of skin. It's not the thing that my whole identity is wrapped around anymore. It's more like a function without any whatever, any slimy ego agenda. And so I kind of stopped drawing. However, just a few days ago, I thought to go back to it. Like how will it be now that I'm more mature and now that I have no agenda of proving myself or seeking validation from drawing, now that it's more cleaner and there is no sense of trying to prove one's worth or something, how will it be if I did, a more or less finished drawing? And so I did. Now, how I usually do it is I sketch with a pencil and then ink it with a pen. And of course, the inking is permanent. There's no more backtracking. You cannot erase it. It's like final. And so when inking, there's the arising of fear, of stress, of like, oh, I don't want to commit a mistake because this is permanent, right? And it'll ruin the whole thing if I did the wrong line. And it's like an old arising, when it comes to drawing, every time that's like a habitual, an old arising of fear of making a mistake, of not being certain, of it's up to you, all the stress and burden is up to you. And if you commit a mistake, the drawing is ruined, you know? And I was like, I don't want this anymore. I'm not drawing to prove myself anymore. I'm not pleasing anyone. This is not for that. This is not for some kind of ego validation. I don't want to be stressed about this. This is mostly for fun. I don't want to take on that burden of fear or stress in drawing. I'm just here for the fun and enjoyment of it. Especially that I'm not in the market, for proving myself, or I'm not making a career out of it anyway. So I don't want the stress of this. I'm just here for the enjoyment. And so the stress and the fear, you carry your own stuff. I'm not going to take you on. I'm not going to take on that burden. You carry that burden yourself. And I'm just here again for the enjoyment. So I'll take this and you take that kind of thing. It's kind of like when a waiter comes and is holding up water or wine, and I'll take the water. I'm not gonna burden myself with the wine. I'll take this and no thank you for the wine. So it's kind of like that. And of course, in so doing, not taking up the burden of fear and so uptight about the drawing, it's much more light. Of course, I'm not claiming to be really good or really a pro or perfect at it, but the process of the activity becomes light, becomes much more flowing because there's the allowance of the quote unquote stress of it to handle itself, to carry its own weight, to carry its own burden, and you don't have to. And so, what I find in going back to drawing is that it's not anymore about the outcome, of creating the great drawing and then having my sense of worth or validity tied to that. It's more about the appreciation of the process. You know, it's sort of like a sense of allowing instead of uptightly doing it and being so stressed and fearful doing it, right? It's like the process of doing it, of drawing or creating art, is an art in of itself, right? And it's a shifting from egoically doing, from this manual ego doership, to a sort of giving autonomy, giving it, allowing it to sort of create its own self. There was even this moment wherein, as I was, drawing, and I kind of gave autonomy to my hand. You're the one. You know this better. You can do this better than me. I give you full autonomy. I grant you full autonomy to draw. You take up that burden. And so there's a shift, right, from this mode or this being or this state of hoarding, like a usurping, the usurping of burden, and releasing that to my hand. And it's the one who does it. I'm out. I'm done. I'm retired. You're the one who do it. And in that way too, the activity becomes light, right? So that's what I discovered, going back to drawing. It's sort of not about the outcome per se anymore, but the discovery. Like I learn these kinds of processes, these kinds of shifting of energy, you can say, of currency, from taking on to releasing. This reminds me of how some really great artists, they mention how like the art or the painting or the drawing paints itself, right? It's like the drawing paints itself. And these artists, when they do their craft, they are in the zone, you can say. and they just in that place, So yeah, it's basically like this offloading, offloading of burden. You can say it's like unusurping, unhoarding, and releasing. So with the case of drawing, it's the releasing of currency from the usurper, from the ego doer to the doing itself, you can say, to the arting itself, to the drawing itself. So from the middleman, right, the ego doer, the usurper, it's making good use of currency, giving it to the isness itself, to it itself, to the drawing itself, instead of the separate me ego doer who's gonna effortfully do the drawing, who's gonna effortfully take upon itself, right? It's like a separate thing. It's like a middleman. Again, it's like a usurper. So it's shifting from that to the actual isness, to the actual doing, to the actual thing where you could say currency actually belongs to. You know how in some cases in our world, and there's a middleman, and then you pay the middleman, and the middleman actually doesn't do a good job, or actually just scams you, and the money, instead of going to the proper place, it gets funneled to the middleman, who just usurps it, who just siphons it. And this goes to a larger scale, wherein the taxes just goes to people who usurp it and funnel it to their own agendas that doesn't serve the all anyway, right? So the bloodstream, the currency goes to that, instead of in service, instead of you can say, the proper place, the actual things or places or people or causes that that currency is for, right? Now, the larger scale of things, as they say, is a reflection of the micro. The microcosm is the reflection of the microcosm. The external is the reflection of the internal. And so when the majority of people is funneling energy into the middleman, to the ego doer, well, then it will also be reflected externally, right? We'll have systems or, people in power who are gravely narcissistic, gravely greedy, and self-serving, you know. It's like it becomes all about these agendas instead of the actual thing, the actual substance. So, referring back to the act of drawing, when I was young, it's all about ego, right? The drawing is not for the drawing itself, but for my validation, for my sense of worth or ego validity. And so instead of funneling, right, the currency, instead of for the actual thing itself, it becomes egoic. It gets funneled to the middleman. It's hijacked, you can say. And so we can see this happening in our world with the people in power, wherein they just put on a show, and it's all about faces, it's all about presentation, it's all about the image they like to put out. But behind closed doors, it's a whole different story. They're not actually doing what they're supposed to do, and it's the complete opposite, right? But anyway, I would like to add to that, with the shifting of currency, there's a sense of impersonalness to it. There's now a sense of impersonalness to it. So, going back again to the metaphor or example of drawing, when the currency is hoarded by the ego doer, it's very personal, right? Like this art, the finishing of this drawing, the outcome of this dictates my sense of self, my sense of worth. It's very personal. This is the proof of my validity. It's very personal. But when the shifting, the offloading occurs, the giving away of autonomy, there's a less sense of personalness to it. Like it's not anymore about the personal ego. And might I say, it's more like AI, because it's less doership, more quote unquote automated. Again, as some artists describe, it's like the drawing draws itself, the painting paints itself. And that's how AI works, right? It does itself, right? It's automated, it's automatic. It's not your doership, it's doing itself, right? So from manual human ego doership to automation, AI, right? And AI, like automated, automated intelligence, like autonomous, from usurpation of autonomy to releasing, granting, giving it blessing. Again, it's granting autonomy, right? And that will be sort of the experience, right? Because you didn't hoard the burden, you released it. And so this, you can say, the shifting of gear is also being represented by the outside world. We can see now that AI is developing rapidly at this time. We're in the menial tasks or maybe tedious task can be done by AI, or can at least can be assisted by AI, right? The elbow grease or the heavy lifting can be assisted by AI. It's sort of a representation or a reflection of the evolution of humanity from the laborer, from being so much of a manual ego doer laborer to, weaning away from that hoarding of labor or of autonomy to slowly letting go and having it be automated. We can notice this, in people who are in positions. They're not in doership, right? They just hire people or they just assign, they offload the burden to the employees, to the workers. They're not getting their hands dirty. They have an idea, they have an intention, and they just offload the heavy lifting or elbow grease to the masses, to the workers. They don't take on that burden themselves. So to summarize, the shift is from the ego doer to being the assigner, you can say, the recognizer, So from hoarding, from usurping, hijacking, you recognize, right? You assign, you grant, you give blessing, like you give autonomy, you recognize its ability, you know? Like going back to the first example of seeking, of wanting to find a dentist. And when I hoarded that task, the experience is not ness, right? I am wasting time and money, and the dentist that I encountered didn't feel right. I didn't feel confident or settled. But the moment I released it, gave that desire or thought form or want or intention the blessing, recognize its ability to self resolve itself, to find its own way, to handle itself, to go its own merry way and find its partner, you can say, then just again, a couple of days. the return is there. It's resolved itself. It's more efficient than me going from one dentist to another and wasting resources for that. Right. So the shift is from, again, hoarding that, usurping, colonizing, hijacking that, and assigning, recognizing, giving that, you can say, conducive environment, allowing environment instead of controlling, oppressing, this kind of, again, taking it all upon yourself because you have no trust, right? There's no recognition, right? You're in notness, you're entertaining notness. There's no recognition of the ability. You are in denial of it. You're in disrecognition of it. So therefore, I'll be the one. I'll be the one to do this my way. So from that, you can say dysfunctional environment or relationship to a healthier functional relationship wherein there's trust, there's an allowing, there's a non-usurpation of autonomy, right? And there's the recognition, there's the recognition in the, again, capacity or capability for self-resolution, that the middleman is not necessary, that it knows itself better than the middleman. This kind of also makes me think of producers. They're not the one doing the work itself. They're not the one doing the labor itself, but they are in recognition. They're in recognition of talents. Oh, this talent or this person is capable of this task. They don't do it all themselves, right? But instead of usurping that, instead of hoarding that, they recognize, they assign and recognize the capacity or talents in whoever. Basically, that's the gist of this, is that kind of shift, from clenched fist hoarding to letting things breathe, releasing the seed, allowing them to be, releasing the seed from your hands and letting it find home, right? Letting it finally grow in the soil.